Welcome to the Fourth Branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. The highest form of ignorance is when you reject something you don't know much about. John F. Kennedy said, "The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all." Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the Fourth Branch program. First, a warning. This program is not suitable for all audiences. I repeat, the content of this program is not for everyone. To find out if it's suitable to you, answer the following two questions. One, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? Question number two, would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Once again, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? And question number two, would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Your time is up, obviously. If you had difficulty answering either question, this program is not for you. If you answered yes to either or to both questions, this program is definitely not for you. But if both of your answers are absolutely not, this program is catered exclusively to you. It is enlightening, educational, informative, and you should stick around. Today, we will continue the very interesting topic, which is the big divide in the country. Stick around, we'll be right with you to discuss what causes the big divide in the United States of America. Contrary to popular misconception, the big divide that has been talked about so much in the media, used by politicians and believed by most, falls squarely on the shoulders of elected officials. That is, the very individuals we, the people, elected to work on our behalf, to represent our views, to implement policies which reflect the views, and to compromise whenever and wherever necessary to advance the affairs of the country. Yes, those very individuals, the senators, the congressmen, the governors, the mayors. And contrary to the widespread misconception that the big divide is between constituents of the two major parties, our research here at the Fourth Branch found the startling fact: the big divide resides mostly among the elected officials, and they are at the roots of spreading the problem among the constituents. This is not a misprint. This is not a misread. In the past 4 episodes, we discussed at length this topic. At the top of the discussion, especially in episode 1, we mentioned there are 3 major factors which are at the roots of the big divide in the country. 1, the elected officials. 2, the constituents. And 3, the ambivalence in the media. Today, we propose to discuss bulleted point number 2, in which we will show you how the constituent also contribute to a certain extent to expand the big divide. But before we tackle this discussion, let's ask the question, why does it matter? Why does it matter that there is a big divide in the country? Well, the very expressions itself suggests it is not something good. It's not something anyone would be looking forward to. It cannot be good. Any sound-minded individuals would want to move away from anything that's not good, from anything that's bad. We know instinctively, intuitively, that a big divide among the constituents cannot possibly be good for the country. After our discussion of the elected officials being one of the factors for the big divide, we know what's causing it. We have been discussing at least the first major factors. Today, we will take a look at the bulleted point number 1, the constituents, and how they too contribute to expand the big divide. First, an announcement. Join me here on the Fourth Branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. In episode 1, 2, and 3, and 4, we discussed really in great length how the elected official, the very individuals we task to legislate, the very individual we voted for to solve problem in this country, the governors, the mayors, the senators, the congressmen, they are a major part of the big divide in the country. And it is not a misprint. It is not a speculation. It is not an assumption. There are currently 4 separate videos in which we provided many examples of how the elected officials have contributed extremely greatly to the big divide. Yes, they have been using it as if they're pointing fingers to the other side. And this is pretty typical of politicians. And as we mentioned, for the past 8 years, since 2010, the Republicans have had complete control of all the branches of the government, well, at least the legislative branch. And since 2017, they have been in control of all 3 branches of the government. And yet, at every turn, the country has been talking about a big divide. And every time that there is an opportunity to fix the problem, they expand it. So I encourage you to take a look at the YouTube People Branch channel, in which you will find out that we discuss and provided examples of how the elected official, the very individual we elected to solve problems, they are indeed at the roots of the big divide in the country. Today, we will be talking about the aspect in which the constituent also take part in helping expanding the big divide. We also ought to remind you that 70 to 80% of the problems of the big divide in the country is actually caused by the elected officials. Yes, it is not a speculation. It is not an assumption. Once again, I strongly encourage you to take a look at those videos in order to see for yourself how today Republicans in particular have been expanding the big divide. So we will not be talking about it at all, because we have talked about it really at length. 4 separate videos for a total of over 4 hours, in which we really provide a lot of examples of such. Now let's take a look at how the constituents themselves has been really be not only the victim of the problem, but they too have been helping expanding the big divide. And we mentioned at the top of the program that it is important to take care of that particular situation, because even by the sound of it, we know a big divide cannot possibly be good for the country. Now, the group that we're talking about, the constituents. Now, although this group represent just a fraction, less than 20% of those who are behind the big divide, individuals who comprise this group are loud, they're voiceful, they're emotional, and they also give the impressions that it is the majority. But as I just mentioned, this group is less than 20% of the problem. In fact, by any calculation, it is 10%, 15 to 10, down to 10%. We will talk about in bulletin point number 3, the ambivalence of the media, which is also a part of the problem, but which represent just a mere 5%. Now, the problem with the constituent is a very complicated problem. And here's the reason. Number one, there are Democrats, there are Republicans, and there are those who fall anywhere in between. We have culture, belief, lifestyle, level of education, level of understanding, rationale, logic, or even lack of any of those contribute a great deal to the complexity of the problem. Believe it or not, the Republicans are the easiest to explain. In matters of related to life, Republicans are very simple-minded individuals. Hey, don't kill the messenger. The explanation about that is forthcoming. Republicans are, for the most part, unable to process complex matters. They see everything in black and white, left or right, which might help to explain why organizations such as Fox, Breitbart, InfoWars, Rush Limbaugh, and the likes are able to build a fortune on the back of the Republicans. They are, for the most part, ignorant of sort, irrespective of their education and upbringing. And there are the Democrats, on the other hand, not so easy to explain. They comprise individuals of various beliefs, understanding, different level of emotions. Democrats are more community-based, society-driven. They don't just see their neighbors. They identify with their neighbors, with their community, with their states, with other people. Democrats are very complex. They have a high degree of apathy, and they prefer rationale over simple words. And the independent, they comprise individuals who are either GOP leaning and others who are Democrats leaning. And despite such, the independent are as clear-cut as GOP are. Those who are more GOP leaning are more inclined to process information just like GOP. And those obviously who are Democrat leaning are more inclined to act like Democrats. For that reason, we are not going to discuss here the independent, because we will put them either among the group leaning the Republican, we will discuss them with the Republican, and the group who are leaning Democrat, we will discuss them as Democrat. Besides, studies suggest those who are leaning one way or the other are statistically aligned with the group they are more leaning towards. So when we return, we will discuss the factors which cause GOP to be so simple-minded in matters of life in general, politics in particular. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back to talk in detail as to why there is such a big divide in the country. First, caused by elected officials, expanded by the constituents. I'll be right back. In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. During the 2016 presidential elections, it was very easy to identify Republicans and Democrats, irrespective of where you'd meet such individuals. You might recall that a lot of Republicans, leaders and constituents alike, were disgusted, at least publicly, so they say anyway, by Trump's style, statements, and so forth. And despite that fact, despite the fact of his behavior, his language, which stayed the same, most Republicans went to the poll and voted for him anyway. On the other hand, most people who supported Bernie Sanders, also considered Democrat, decided to either stay home, and some even voted for Donald Trump. According to the final tally, at least 20 million plus individuals, Bernie's fans and other Democrats, did not participate in the election rather than to vote for Hillary. As mentioned in the previous segment, Republicans are simple-minded. Democrats are very complex. We'll be right back. Ignorance, they say, is the biggest threat to any democracy. Indeed, it is. Plato, a Greek philosopher born in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Today, members in the Republican Party wear ignorance as a badge of honor, while the rest of the country watch powerless the destruction of a country which was once the envy of the world. The media is the enemy of the country, said Donald Trump. The Democrat legislators are obstructionists for not going along with everything the president wants. The Department of Justice is biased for investigating corruption in the Trump administration. This is the United States of America. Any question?
Wayfair, let me show you how I do my thing. Check it. weeping my this, weeping my that, weeping my this, weeping my that, weeping my this, weeping my that, weeping it all. Here we go now. Weeping my this, weeping my that, weeping my this, weeping my that.
Don't just shop for your home.
The country is not divided between Democrats and Republicans, but rather between those who seek knowledge and those who choose to live in ignorance, those who seek the truth and wisdom, and those who promote and enjoy falsehood, those who use their brains and those who have outsourced theirs to ignorance. The country is in need of a leader who knows the way, shows the way, and is willing to go all the way. We mentioned earlier that the big divide in the country is not caused by the constituent, but rather by the very elected officials, congressmen, senators, mayors, governors, the very people that we elected in office to solve problems are the ones that are at the roots of the big divide in the country. Once again, for those of you who did not hear me saying that earlier, there are currently on the People Branch YouTube channels 4 videos which not only explain in great detail about that aspect, that the elected officials are responsible for the big divide, but we also provide plenty of examples of such. So it's not a speculation, it is not an assumption that our elected officials today, it falls squarely on the shoulders of the Republican Party. They have been in control of both houses for the past 8 years. But despite that, the constituents bear also some responsibility. And we started the discussion by saying that indeed, we, the people, do have our share of responsibility as well. It is expressed mostly in the form of the way we act, the way we react, the way we vote, and the way we process information. It so happened that Republicans are much easier to deal with. For whatever reason, it is found, it is scientifically proven that in matters, life-related matters, Republicans are very simple-minded. Hey, don't kill the messenger. It is explained in very interesting term, and here it is a kind of a what I would call a snapshot of a brain scan between Democrats and Republicans. Now there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, and if you hear any conversation in a room where there are Democrats and there are Republicans, you would notice that there is a back and forth between those two parties. Democrats are naturally logical because they always consider all sides of a story. Republicans are very simple-minded when it comes to any again, to any life-related matter. This picture on the left side of your screen is actually a brain scan of Democrat and Republican. Interestingly enough, even Mother Nature is either ironic or accurate. Now, Republicans happen to process life-related matter with the right side of the brain. Interesting, isn't it? And Democrats process life-related matters with the left side of the brain. So even Mother Nature seems to go along with the idea of the left and the right. But here's the interesting thing. The right side of the brain, which is the amygdala, right amygdala of the brain, can only process emotions, things that are really very simple to absorb. That's why in any conversation, you would hear Republicans define everything in black and white. It's either you good or you bad. It's either you Christian or you not. It's either you a child molester or you not. It's either you have a gun or you don't. It's either you pro-life or you not. Everything is black and white for Republicans. There is no middle ground. They have no way of discerning in between. Again, I want to be very clear that Republicans in life-related matters, we're not talking about in general here. We're talking about just life-related matters. And that's the reason it is very easy for organizations like Fox or Breitbart or InfoWars or Rush Limbaugh to be able to very easily convince Republicans of whatever that they put out. I have experience of my own where having a conversation with a Republican is actually a very difficult thing to do because as far as they're concerned, I can give you tons and tons of examples. There is no logic in between. It's either Trump is good or Trump is bad. There is no middle ground. He's doing such a great job, so he cannot be bad. The economy is good, so Trump cannot be bad. So it is not just a science, but it is proven through life experience that you have any conversation with any Republican, you have to walk away because there is no way for them to process complex matters. They cannot separate the fact that Trump can be a crooked individual and at the same time be able to do things that end up benefiting someone else, not because he wants to, not because he worked towards that, but because of what we would conceive as a byproduct of an action. If you take any matters that requires logic, that requires analysis, that is complex, then it is more likely than not, if you're having that conversation with a Republican, it is a lost cause. Because they would stick to whatever that they want to stick to, and there is absolutely nothing you can explain that could get that individual to change his or her mind, because as far as he or she is concerned, black is black, white is white, there is nothing in between. So it is not someone's mindset, it is not my explanation. It is not just someone who sits in a lab that just come up with this information, but it is proven, life proven, that it is the way it is. Case in point, it doesn't matter today, for instance, what Trump does. No matter how bad his behavior is, how bad his actions are, you take the individual who supported him and elected him in office, As far as they are concerned, nothing matters. That's why from the time Trump was bidding for the office of the presidency, his approval rating was hovering around 40%. And today, despite everything that has happened, his approval rating is still hovering around 40%. Translation, there is absolutely nothing that is done, that he has done, no matter how bad it is, as far as those individuals are concerned. This is it. So it's not a speculation, it's not an assumption that indeed in life-related matters, in general, in politics, Republicans are proven to be simple-minded. No, it's not me who says that. I didn't do any scientific study, but the scientific studies are available for anyone who wish to find those information. And the reason it is to no fault of the Republicans, it is because they process information with the right side of the brain called the right amygdala, which happen to only process emotional aspects, simple life-related matter. So in a sense, you can say that Republicans are victims of their own biological structure. Now, this is not to say that there are no Republicans who can force the issue, meaning they can become conscious of the situation and try to get out of that dilemma, the exceptions. But in general, so the information that we are discussing has to do with the general standard, the general behavior, the general idea. And because of that, now, when you have to have in a room, in a situation, in a country, two completely different groups of people. Now, you have the Democrat who process information with the left part of the brain called the left postula, which is the left part of the brain, and which happen to process complex information, which is logical. In other words, if you say blacks, Democrat would tend to see different shades of blacks. If you talk about violence, Democrats process it as different level of violence. If you talk about crime, Democrat processes a different degree, variety of crime. Republican is just crime or no crime. There is no middle ground. So you put those two groups in a room, you are going to walk away pretty much with very little progress to have compromise. So it has to do with the biological structures of those two groups. Republican process information with the right amygdala of the brain. Democrat process information with the left postula of the brain. And that makes them, those two groups, really at odds. They cannot agree because they cannot see things the same way. If a Democrat trying to explain to a Republican about different aspects of a particular topic of life, you would notice in any conversation, whether it's on TV or you have your own personal experience with a Republican, you would notice that if they adopt and they stick to an issue and they already have a stand, it is useless to try to reason, because nothing is going to happen. And as far as that individual is concerned, he or she is right. No matter what you say, just goes right above the individual's head. Now, this is the part which causes the big divide in the country. And that's a reason that you see people screaming at each other, and sometimes they even get to the point of physical confrontation. It's because there is no way for both sides to figure out a way to compromise, because Republicans say black is black, and Democrats would try to explain that, well, this is a shade of black. As far as Republicans are concerned, it just doesn't matter. So that kind of behavior helped to make such divide, or makes it somewhat, if not permanent, but last for a while. Now remember, I mentioned 70 to 80% of the big divide in the country are caused by legislators. In other words, if those individuals could do the job for which they were elected, could legislate, then the divide, the big divide we're talking about, which is among the constituent, would most likely be not negligible, but somewhat controllable by circumstances, because there would be a legislation that would help at least bring this group a little bit closer. Because despite the fact that there is this divide among the constituent, remember that there are also issues that actually, interestingly, unite those two groups, which in effect, it is somewhat ironic because of the fact that the constituents have figured out a way to compromise in certain issues, but the legislators, who are supposed to do just that, because that their job is to advance the affairs of the country, and they're the one causing the biggest problem. The biggest divide happens at among the elected officials. Now, a couple of days ago, we had this group, a group of people who took to the street to protest against the idea of the Trump administration bringing the website down on Sundays. You may have recalled that I explained to you that there is a small window of enrollment for people who want to enroll in healthcare under Obamacare, because Obamacare is still the healthcare system that's still prevalent in the country. After Republicans have tried everything possible to kill it, didn't succeed. Now the last effort that's being done by the elected officials is not to help those people who want to sign up to enroll in healthcare, for them to be able to do that, but rather to cause problem to prevent them from being enrolled. See the problem? It's the elected officials. What are they doing? on Sundays, the time that most people, after churches, after coming from church, they have time to sit down with their family and discuss different ideas in order to enroll in healthcare. This is the time that the Trump administration wants to bring down the site to prevent, because they already have the data. It's on Sundays that the majority of the people who want to enroll in healthcare, that's the time that they sit down to do that. And what do the elected officials do? Say, let's bring the site down so that they don't have that privilege. See the problem? The big divide in the country is caused not by the constituent, but by the elected official. And those people protesting on the streets, they're not just Democrats, they're also Republicans who want to enroll in the healthcare system. There are currently 20 plus million people currently enrolled in Obamacare. They're not Democrats, they are both Democrats and Republicans. So they recognize the advantage of having that healthcare system available to them, because it helps them it shields them from certain problems that usually caused by health insurance companies. Now, instead of being helped by the elected official, now the same elected officials are the ones who try to harm them. Yes, I've been saying that for the past four episodes, the big divide in the country is caused by elected officials. Now, the situation that I described earlier in regards to the way that constituents process information is at the root of some of the big divide. But I don't want you to lose track of the fact that it's really less than 20% of the big divide in the country. Yes, there are many more people in that group, the constituent group, than there are elected officials, and yet it is the elected official who takes the major part, the major aspect of the big divide in the country is caused by the elected official. Because in occasion, the people unite to get something done or to claim for something. They were united under the situation of the healthcare. They took to the street, both Democrat, Republican, Independent, they took to the street to demand that the Trump administration leave the site online on Sunday so that they can enroll. They also were the one who opposed the tax cut, the $1.5 trillion tax cut. 60% of them opposed that. 60+% also opposed the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh. And they weren't just Democrat. So time and time and time again, we have the elected official being the problem, the roots of the big divide in the country. So when you hear that the country has never been so divided, don't look to the Democrats or to the Republicans on the street, to the masses, to the constituent, because the major part of the problem actually reside with the elected official. Yes, it's the senators, it's the congressmen, it's the governors, it's the mayors. For the past 8 years, almost a decade, the Republicans have been in control of both houses, and for the past 2 years of all branches of the government. And yet, they pass a tax cut that's opposed by 60% of the population. They place Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, opposed by more than 60% of the population. They also push to kill Obamacare, that's adopted by more than 60% of the population. In other words, the elected official today, we can put the blame squarely on the Republican elected officials. They do everything which harm the country, which harm the constituent. We also did explain as to why they do that. But because we also have the constituent who have also their shares of responsibility, but nevertheless seems to be more in tune with reality than the elected officials are, the question is, how do the constituents solve that problem? Now, there are more examples of such that really tells us that the constituent seems to have, despite the major difference in their brain, but they seem to be able to be more conscious of doing things that benefit the country in comparison to the elected officials whose primary job is actually to do that, to legislate, to come up with solutions to problems. In 2009, you have a group of people, just like in any election, in any political time, when a new president is elected, there are reactions to the way that people see that individual who's going to sit in the Oval Office. Time and time again, we go to the poll and we say, let's put someone else in the Oval Office to attend to the affairs of the people. Because we decide that whoever was there, whichever party had the lever of the government, may have not acted the way that we wanted, may have not done what we wish that that individual or that administration did. So in the next election, we decide to pick a different party. Now, we go through that process over and over and over again. And yet we seem to be stuck as constituent, we seem to be stuck in that vicious cycle of electing one party or the other and being disappointed. Because every time we change party, we take a look at what we get and we say, no, we don't like it. We are in a democratic system, and it is perfectly fine to change the party that's in control when either the party moves away from what the leaders of the party promise or propose, but once they get hold of power, they no longer attend to the affairs, or they no longer do what they said they were going to do. It's perfectly okay to do that. But what's not acceptable as members of the constituency is to keep voting the same people and send them to Washington or keep them in Washington all the while they doing things that are not just harmful to us, but that's just attend to their personal agenda. For instance, you have a number of Republicans today, Mitch McConnell, Orrin Hatch, Lindsey Graham, a bunch of those people have been in Washington for decades. And if you look at what they've been doing, it has not been things that beneficial to the country. It has been, they have been passing policies, implement policies that are actually detrimental to we the people. And the question is, why do we keep voting those people in office? Why do we keep sending the very individual that's harmful to the country back to Washington? We know they are harmful to the country because the policies that they've been implemented, they have the legislations they have put out are not good for the country. We know that. We the people, we know that because we experience what we are impacted by what they do. So why do we keep sending them there? The big problem today, as we were discussing earlier, is the very fact that Republicans in general, they are very simple-minded. If they want one thing, even if all the other things are okay, they focus on that one thing and they would not let go. We know that because if you remember, when the Healthcare Act was passed, Republican leaders, assisted by Fox and of course other Republican mouthpieces, were out there. They had this propaganda about death panel, which we knew then it wasn't true, and confirmed and debunked later that it was just that propaganda. They went through the process of telling Republican constituents that first, Obamacare was going to kill your grandma, your grandpa, your parents, because they have a quote-unquote death panel. When that did not work, they came with the idea that, well, that healthcare is going to cost a lot of jobs in the country. We knew then that wasn't true. Of course, debunked and confirmed later that that is not true. In fact, if anything, that during this whole process that we have had a slowdown of an increase in employment and a slowdown in unemployment. After that just did not work, they came up with the idea that the Healthcare Act is so bad it's going to crumble on its own. They say that since 2010. And even a year ago, they tried to kill Obamacare again. So now, no, it did not crumble on its own. In fact, as we are talking, there are 20 plus million people, and there are more people enrolling in Obamacare. So the very problem, as we have been discussing, is the fact that Republicans, constituent, Republican in general, in life-related matter, they are so simple-minded. When the idea of death panel came, they embrace it and they go out there and oppose Obamacare because, well, their leaders told them that it's going to kill their parents and their grandparents. So they very simple-minded when it comes to that. They're very gullible. They're very naive because they believe those things. They were also naive to believe that Obamacare was going to cost jobs because their leaders were out there promoting the fact that that's going to happen. And you hear it on Fox, you hear it everywhere, and before you know it, you're talking to Republicans, and what they're saying is that it's going to cost jobs. How did they find that out? Not because they had they done any analysis or they had any logic behind it. It's because they heard it from their leaders. Later, when Republican leaders came with the idea that it's gonna crumble on its own. I personally met with people who think that it's not wise to sign up for Obamacare because it's going to go away. So along the way, first, as you can see, that Republican constituents are very simple-minded. They cannot process complex matters. They cannot sit down and see that, well, this kind of statement by their leaders not only are false, but they do not make any sense. They cannot process life-related matters in general and politics in particular. It is to no fault of theirs because they process information with the right amygdala, part of the brain. So if their leaders say Obamacare is going to kill their parents and their grandparents, it is the emotional aspect of processing information that say Obamacare is bad. Let's stay away from that. Now, despite the fact there was some pushback and Republican leaders came with Obamacare is going to cost jobs. Whoa, we cannot afford that because we need our job. Again, this is the emotional aspect. They do not have the ability to process complex information because if they did, they could have sit down and tried to think things through and say, where is the correlation? But they only process simple thing. Well, if it's going to cost job, that's all I need to know, then I don't want it. So it's not me sitting here and telling you that Republicans are simple-minded. It's because it's proven in the lab, it's proven scientifically, but it's proven on a day-to-day basis that they're incapable of processing life-related matters, and which is also a cause for the big divide in the country. But the problem doesn't lie squarely on the constituent, as I mentioned many times, because 70 to 80% of the big divide in the country is caused by elected officials. It's the Republican mayors, the governors, the senators, the congressmen. They're the one at the source of the problem. Now, you may be able to grasp the next part that we're going to discuss. For instance, there is a list of problems in the Trump administration today. And it is a long list. And that list was interestingly compiled by Republicans. And it shows a number of of problems you would call issues that Republicans were supposed to address. The Republican legislators, a part of their job is to conduct what we call congressional investigation. Now, why am I saying that? You will see very shortly that it is also causing part of the big divide. Again, the elected official. Congressional investigation are meant not only to find problems, scandals, corruption in a particular administration. And during the Obama administration, you may recall there were so many congressional investigations, it made your head spin. In fact, as we are talking, there are currently 4 congressional investigations being conducted about the past administration. No kidding. Currently, 4 congressional investigations by the Republican in the legislative body about Obama administration. Things that are passed. Zero about the Trump administration. Now ask yourself this very important question. Has there not been any scandal, any corruption since Trump has taken office? You don't have to answer that. You already know the answer. No, part of the big divide in the country, as I showed, have been demonstrated via example after example, is the fact that Republicans who have been in control of both houses since 2010 have been at the root of the big divide, and they make it happen in so many different ways. It's not just about the constituent, but it's also about this aspect of their job. They do not investigate corruption. They do not investigate scandal. They only investigate the other side. And that's what's been causing the big divide, because if you have a majority today who is Republican, and it is found by you, the constituent, that they're not investigating scandal and corruption in the Trump administration, then why would you complain if Democrats do the same thing? And that's what at the roots of the big divide. But who causes that? The Republicans. They are in the majority. They make it a point not to investigate anything about any corruption that the Trump administration has been going through. The EPA, the former EPA secretary, had at least 21 different corruption incidents that happened under his watch. And yet, 0 congressional investigation. And the list goes on and on. And you look at that list, and the reason that Republicans had made that list is to say that if Democrat takes over the House, they're going to conduct all those investigations. It is actually sad that those individuals whose job is to do that, they simply decide not to, but worry that Democrats are going to do that. Yes, the big divide in the United States of America. When we hear that there is a big divide in the country, it's not between members, it's not between constituents. It is squarely at the door of the elected official. So Republicans recognize all the problems in the Trump administration. They know, they made that list. They They have the list of what's been going on that's actually not good for the country. And yet they decide to do absolutely nothing. And yet they have the goals to conduct currently 4 investigations about the past administration. Yes, Republican elected officials are at the root of the big divide in the country. Yes, they point fingers. They like pointing fingers because that's easy. Not only it's easy to point fingers, but they realize that their constituent seems to just swallow that. They just have to go to Fox and say it, and that's all it takes. Just go to Fox and say Democrats are obstructionists. And you don't have to do anything beyond that. And the next thing you know, over the airwave interviews, that's all you hear. Ask your representative the question, why are they not investigating all the scandals in the Trump administration? Because that's what's supposed to happen. You're not Republican legislators to investigate Democrats. Republican legislators' job is to investigate corruption, no matter which administration is in the Oval Office. That's the job. That's why the framers of the Constitution said it that way, that the legislative body is separate from the executive body. That's the job. So yes, the big divide in the United States of America is caused today by the Republican elected official. So don't look elsewhere. Don't look towards Democrat to find where the problem is. Look squarely at your representative. And if you are a patriot, and if you are concerned about the direction of the country, and if you are concerned about the big divide, don't look at Democrats as the problem. Because, as Michael Jackson said, look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Don't look next to you to find the problem, because pointing fingers is easy. It's always somebody else. Look in the mirror, straight in the mirror, and you will find that the problem resides squarely with the elected officials that you've been sending to Washington. The Republican elected official has been in Washington in control for 8 consecutive years. And this is what we have. Yes, they are responsible of the big divide in the country. I'll be right back. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday.
If people say your dreams are crazy, if they laugh at what you think you can do, good. Stay that way. Because what non-believers fail to understand is that calling a dream crazy is not an insult. it's a compliment. Don't try to be the fastest runner in your school or the fastest in the world. Be the fastest ever. Don't picture yourself wearing OBJ's jersey. Picture OBJ wearing yours. Don't settle for homecoming queen or linebacker. Do both. Lose 120 pounds and become an Ironman after beating a brain tumor. Don't believe you have to be like anybody to be somebody. If you're born a refugee, don't let it stop you from playing soccer for the national team at age 16. Don't become the best basketball player on the planet. Be bigger than basketball. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. When they talk about the greatest team in the history of the sport, make sure it's your team. If you have only one hand, don't just watch football. Play it at the highest level. And if you're a girl from Compton, don't just become a tennis player. Become the greatest athlete ever. Yeah, that's more like it. So don't ask if your dreams are crazy. Ask if they're crazy enough.
Republican constituents are still living in the dark. Most Republicans, especially those who still support Donald Trump, lives very largely in the dark, and that is despite the wide availability of the internet. The cause of the problem is not lack of information, but rather an inclination to seek for sources of information which support their preset views, however false, however misleading. As such, Trumpublicans are more inclined to reject any information which does not support their views, does not please them, or is critical of Donald Trump. They do not have to look far. Fox Propaganda Network, known and referred to by most as Fox News, is the major source of misinformation, disinformation, distorted information, wrong information, and even outright lies. Other sources such as Rush Limbaugh, Breitbart, InfoWars have also contributed greatly to nurture and preserve the dummification of the Republican Party. The problem is exacerbated by the GOP legislators who also push false narratives in order to consolidate their base, although it is to the detriment of the country. Such posture on the part of the Republican leaders and the GOP propaganda network, even very harmful to the country. And the reason? It's because it helped to preserve or to increase or even to extend the dummification of the Republican constituent. Who in the Republican Party will muster enough courage now that John McCain is gone to shine the light for the Republican Party? As of this moment, most in the Republican Party still live in the dark. I'll be right back. The country is not divided between Democrats and Republicans, but rather between those who seek knowledge and those who choose to live in ignorance. The country is divided between those who seek the truth and wisdom and those who promote and enjoy falsehoods. It is divided between those who use their brain and those who refuse to and outsource theirs to the ignorant. Today, the country is in dire need of a leader who knows the way, shows the way, and is willing to go all the way. I'll be right back. I thank you for taking the time and be with me today, this morning. I invite you to join me again at 6:30 p.m. for another segment of the Big Divide in the country. This is the Fourth Branch program in which we take a look at topics, issues which impact our lives. The news you can get anywhere, everywhere. What we take a look at is, again, topics and issues which can impact our lives, the lives of our children and our grandchildren. And you have the information, armed with information, to make decisions, better decisions, not information to strengthen your political views, not decision to strengthen the views, your preset views, but rather information which can help you distinguish between wrong and right. The Fourth Branch program was created with one purpose and one purpose alone. It catered exclusively to people with common sense, and its purpose is to achieve a more perfect union. And that can only be done when we all achieve a level of knowledge, understanding, a level which can help achieve a more perfect union. Have a good day or a good afternoon, whichever that might be. See you at 6:30. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.